pedophile escapades. This is a TV presenter in England who over decades had molested hundreds of children. And they brought up the fact that there was a royal cover-up involved in this. He had a lot of ties to the royal family. And they saw in 2013 that a 2009 police report had been heavily redacted, and they could see a few months ago when they reported this, what had been redacted, the connections to the royal family. And there were quite a few. He told officers the first time he visited a Surrey school where he was said to have abused girls, he was there with Princess Alexandra for a garden party. He said, Princess Alex is a patron of a hostel for girls in care. At this place, I'm a cross between a long-term boyfriend and a fixer of special trips out. And there were not just those connections, there were connections to all the members of the royal family. But it's not just the UK. It's also the UN. Take a look at this story from 2007 that was on INFOWARS. This was written by Steve Watson at the time. He said, the London Telegraph had pointed out that more than 20 different cases of child sex slavery involving UN staff had been reported in southern Sudan. The Telegraph reports that it had learned of dozens of victims' accounts claiming that some peacekeeping and civilian staff based in the town were regularly picking up young children in their UN vehicles, forcing them to have sex. The Telegraph states that it's thought that hundreds of children may have been abused. And then, of course, there was also a report in that same article back in 2003. The AP reported that UN officials were identified as using a ship chartered for peacekeepers in order to traffic young girls from Thailand to East Timor as prostitutes. In the same year, it was also revealed that other UN staff were guilty of raping women on a systematic scale in Sierra Leone. And previous to this, the previous year, 2002, a massive pedophilia scandal within the UN was uncovered involving sexual abuse against West African refugee children in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and other countries. The UPI reported that senior UN officials knew of the widespread pedophilia, and not only did they not take any action, but they covered up the atrocities. This is what we saw happen in the UK. It was brought to the attention of Scotland Yard several times, and those who were high up in Scotland Yard stopped it. The BBC started to have a report that was done by some reporters. The people in charge of the BBC stopped the report. That's what's happening in all these cases. It's at the highest levels. People lower down will see what's happening. They'll start to report it, but the higher ups will take it down. Now look at this report from 2006. DynCorp and Halliburton sex slave scandal won't go away. This was in 2005, and McKinney grilled Secretary Rumsfeld and General Myers on the scandal. She said, I watched President Bush deliver a moving speech at the UN in September 2003, where he mentioned the crisis of sex trade. And he wasn't necessarily talking about the UN sex trade. He was talking about other people in the sex trade. It was okay, I guess, if the UN did it. But she said the president called for punishment of those involved in the horrible business. At the moment of that speech, DynCorp was exposed for having been involved in the buying and selling of young women and children. While all this was going on, DynCorp kept the Pentagon contract to administer the smallpox and anthrax vaccines, and is now working on a plague vaccine through the Joint Vaccine Acquisition Program. Is it the policy of the U.S. government to reward companies that traffic in women and little girls? Well, you know what? I guess if it comes to vaccine, who else could you find better for what they're putting in the vaccines than people who are running child pedophile rings? That would be companies that are involved in that. Now, we see back in 2011, we see that there was also a cover-up in Afghanistan where the police there were using drugs and pedophilia. A secret U.S. diplomatic cable released by the whistleblowing organization WikiLeaks, I guess that's why they hate Julian Assange so much, showed that DynCorp was providing drugs and financed a party for Afghan national police recruits where young boys were used as sex slaves. Now, this is a tradition that had been banned by the Taliban, but now it was making a big comeback, just like heroin was making a big comeback after they got the Taliban out. It involves forcing small boys dressed in women's clothing to dance in front of howling men, and after the dancing, the boys are auctioned off to the highest bidder to be raped. The U.S. State Department recently referred to the practice as, quote, widespread, culturally sanctioned form of male rape. And according to human rights organizations and various media reports, DynCorp hosted just such an event at a party. So there you go. Now, talking of parties, this is the other article that came out this week. Bill Clinton has been seen in a lawsuit to have been attending regularly parties or orgies at the Caribbean compound of a known pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. A new lawsuit has revealed how Bill Clinton took multiple trips to Epstein's private island where he kept young women as sex slaves. Clinton was also apparently friends with a woman who collected naked pictures of underage girls for Epstein to choose from. And Clinton didn't cut his ties with her. In fact, he invited her to Chelsea Clinton's wedding, one of about 400 guests. And also, we see that hosts of famous friends, including, here's the royal family again, Prince Andrew, stayed at the New York mansion of this pedophile even after his arrest. Now, there was an interesting quote in this lawsuit, and this came from somebody who was an unidentified woman in the lawsuit. She said, "I remember asking Jeffrey Epstein, 'What's Bill Clinton doing here?' And he laughed it off and said, 'He owes me a favor.'" And at least one woman on the compound was there unwillingly, said she was forced to live as one of his underage sex slaves for years and forced to have sex with politicians. Oh, what politicians would that be? Businessmen, royalty, academicians, etc. Okay, so that's what we see happening. Now, this is something that's been going on for a long time, of course. Bill Clinton had a long history of sexual assaults. We've talked to Kathleen Willey, and she said Hillary Clinton was attacking all of these women, as we all know, and she pointed out that Hillary Clinton was actually the war on women, that it's not the Republican Party that's at a war with women, but it was Hillary Clinton because she's covering up these sorts of things. She didn't just cover them up, though, for her husband. She covered up sexual assaults for her diplomats when she was Secretary of State. Look at this article. This is from 2013, Hillary's Sorry State of Affairs. State Department whistleblower has accused high-ranking staff of a massive cover-up, including keeping a lid on findings that members of then Secretary Hillary Clinton's security detail and the Belgian ambassador solicited prostitutes. A chief investigator for the agency's inspector general wrote a memo outlining 8 cases that were derailed by senior officials, including, in at least one instance, interference by Clinton's chief of staff, Cheryl Mills. Among the bombshell findings, they found that a DS agent was called off a case against U.S. Ambassador to Belgium, Howard Gutman, over claims that he solicited prostitutes, including minors. And the agent began his investigation and had determined that the ambassador routinely ditched his protective security detail in order to solicit sexual favors from both prostitutes and minor children. The ambassador's protective detail and the embassy's surveillance detection team were well aware of the behavior. Now, finally, let's take a look at one last case. This was written up, this article is from 2010. And this is actually a case that started in the 1990s, came to light in 2002. This is a Portuguese pedophile ring that used state-run orphanages to serve celebrities, diplomats, and politicians. The same group we see in the UK, same group we see in America. They said a Portuguese court sentenced 6 people up to 18 years in jail for abusing children from a state orphanage in a marathon court case that has shocked the nation. The defendants included a well-known television presenter, a former diplomat, and 2 doctors, given prison sentences from just under 6 years to 18 years for their participation in a network of abuse. There were 32 children that were residents of a home that was part of a network of institutions. So the point is, when are we going to wake up to this? We saw at South by Southwest as Jakari was talking to someone about gun control. The guy said, yeah, okay, guns, it can be a problem if you've got a dictatorship and all the guns are in the hands of bad people, but this is America. That is very naive. If you're not worried about the surveillance state, if you're not worried about a government that wants all the weapons and is accumulating them at an unprecedented in history level, if you're not concerned about that, you should be. And you should be very concerned about how deeply evil these people are and how this is a global problem. This is not something from the UK, the UN, the US. It's not even the Democrats or the Republicans. We see Rumsfeld. We see that Bush was involved in the Franklin scandal. We see that we have Michael Aquino, who was working with the NSA, a Satanist. He was accused of pedophilia. He was apparently, the allegations were that he was involved in that at the Presidio. The allegations were that the NSA got him out of there. This is the guy who wrote Mind War. Do you see how the CIA, how the NSA, how the government, whether it's Democrats, whether it's Republicans, whether it's the US, the UK, the UN, they're all involved in this. They're all doing the same thing. It attracts the same type of person. Dark, satanic individuals want this kind of power over us, and we must not let them have it. Well, that's it for this part of the news. Please consider supporting our operation. Become a subscriber to Prison Planet TV. You can share that with up to 10 other people at the same time. It's a great way to pass on the information. Now, we'll be back on Monday at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, but stay tuned. We've got a couple reports, one from Leanne McAdoo. She's going to talk about medical conspiracies, fact or fiction. And we also have a report from Jakari Jackson. Why are chewing gum sales in free fall? Stay tuned.
Celebrate the spirit of freedom and liberty upon which our nation was founded at INFOWARSShop.com. Molon Lave is ancient Greek for come and take it. This popular design combines both classic Greek Spartan imagery with modern M16 assault rifles. Now available in women's tees and proudly made in the USA. Celebrate the spirit of 1776 with the George Washington brass belt buckle or this incredibly sharp-looking 1776 hat. Badass. And be sure to check out the new arrivals at INFOWARS Life, where you can prepare your body to perform at peak levels with Survival Shield Nascent Iodine, Super Male Vitality, and Fluoride Shield. And wake up, America. Immune Support Blend is the healthy choice for the gourmet coffee lover. So get incredibly high-quality, freedom-based products and help fund the revolution at INFOWARSShop.com.
Many anthropologists and archaeologists believe that before man even discovered the power to harness and use fire, we were involved in agrarian activities. That is, taking the seeds of plants and then replanting them to produce more. The very foundation of our modern civilization and human culture is centered around the planting and cultivation of edible plants.
Here are some of the amazing deals at INFOWARS Seed Center at INFOWARSShop.com.
The Survival Seed Vault by My Patriot Supply features only the finest survival heirloom seeds for a robust and hardy garden, even in the toughest times. We also have starter varieties of the deluxe seed packages for fruit, salads, salsa, peppers, medical herbs, and more.
Go to the INFOWARS Seed Center at INFOWARSShop.com.
And remember, the revolution against tyranny is growing.
U.S. gum sales are down. Now, there are many theories as to what causes this, but the Associated Press reports an 11% drop in the past 4 years. The commenters on the article are convinced, at least in part, that the decrease in sales is due to aspartame. Aspartame, the artificial sweetener made from the bacteria poop of genetically modified organisms. I am not making this up. Let's take a look at some of these comments. Aspartame in most all gum is poisonous. Other similar sweeteners with different names are just as poisonous. How about we try using cane sugar for gum like back in the 70s? Aspartame and other artificial sweeteners/ingredients are the problem. The decline is related to aspartame. It's very difficult to find gum without it. And it goes on from there. Back in 2010, INFOWARS interviewed Dr. Russell Blaylock on a myriad of topics, but here's what he had to say about aspartame.
If we start looking at some of the other things that are being done in this society, for instance, the use of aspartame, widespread use of aspartame, which is also proven to be a brain toxin, without any question. It's also linked to an increased incidence of cancer, to any reasonable objective mind. These studies prove it. And so when they were doing the first approval of aspartame, when it was made by G.D. Searle Company, they told G.D. Searle, do some experiments and present them to the FDA and we'll see about approval. Well, they did the experiments and studies on mice, and they presented to G.D. Searle, and a board of scientists, which included neuroscientists, said, well, we don't think this should be approved because there's a very high incidence of brain tumors.
And just as a note, the pitchman for G.D. Searle at the time of aspartame's approval was Donald Rumsfeld, who went on to become our former defense secretary. If you'd like to find out where else you can find aspartame, check out Food, the Ultimate Secret Exposed. You can find more reports at INFOWARS.com.